Welcome to the conversation at airsafe.com. I'm your host, Todd Curtis. On November 6, 2019, I had a conversation with radio station CKTB of St. Catharines, Canada, where we discussed some of the recent requirements from Transport Canada that 737 MAX pilots go under additional training above and beyond FAA requirements before the aircraft is allowed to fly again in Canada.
Well, we're still waiting for these Boeing 737 MAXs to be back in the air. It's been, I think it's fair to say it's been a tumultuous year for the Boeing folks, and especially this design of their plane, which of course has been through the ringer, absolutely through the ringer. The latest piece. Well, we're waiting for these things to get cleared again. It seems like we're getting closer to that point. Some of the unions for the airline attendants and everything else have been saying, "Look, you better make sure that these things are safe at the end of the day. We don't want to be going up in something that's still sketchy, to say the least." Transport Canada will have to figure that out for the union folks. Todd Curtis is with airsafe.com and joined us on the program. Todd, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing just fine. Thanks for having me this morning.
Let's face it, at this point in time, this plane's marketability or anything like that it's still in the dumpster, isn't it, man?
Well, marketability, not so much. They've had a very successful run in getting orders around the world. The problem is getting them to legally fly it again.
How close are we to that?
Boeing is optimistic. I'm not so optimistic. They've pronounced in the recent past, that they'd like to get them up and running by the end of the year. But it's not up to Boeing. The FAA in the United States and several other regulatory agencies around the world, including Transport Canada, have weighed in and said, look, we're not just going to take the FAA's word for it. Unlike in the past, when the FAA was basically accepted by everyone around the world as the final word in whether or not an American aircraft can be certified to fly. There are concerns out there, including in Canada, and those concerns have to be addressed above and beyond the FAA and Boeing requirements before this airplane flies.
Is that an indictment on, I guess, the FAA's processes, or is it just kind of a general uneasiness, you think?
I think it's an uneasiness born of a concern, not just of the FAA, but of the entire process for the certification of the 737 MAX, that the combination of the FAA and Boeing together, which has worked well in the past, has certified numerous aircraft over the last several decades, that somehow or another that process skipped a beat this time around and something was missed. And Transport Canada and other organizations would like to make sure that those loose ends are tied up this time.
Is there a sense then, kind of going forward, like of how long it might take then, really? Because if everybody wants to do their exhaustive kind of look through and kind of going through with the fine-tooth comb, if everybody's doing that, it could take a long time to get it kind of across the board approval sort of thing.
It could take a long time if individual organizations around the world had different requirements, but there has been an industry response, a collective response to this. In fact, last month there was a joint communique released by a number of organizations, including the FAA, the European authorities, Transport Canada, etc., stating basically what their general concerns were. And those organizations are still working together with the goal, especially in the words of Air Canada, to have the aircraft simultaneously certified to fly around the world. So although there are concerns separate from the FAA, those organizations are working with the FAA to make sure they're all on the same page.
Does it seem like they're getting the electronic issues kind of under control, or what?
I think they have the technical side of it under control. What was the issue beyond the MCAS system, which is the system on the aircraft that was involved with the two crashes, was the fact that there were requirements for new pilots for this aircraft that weren't sufficient. For example, Boeing was promoting the aircraft as a follow-on to the previous model. So if you were certified to fly the previous model, with an hour's worth of training on an iPad, you'd be able to fly this new model. Well, the new requirements that seem to be coming into focus would require that any 737 MAX pilot would have to go through specific training scenarios in a simulator to not only replicate the kind of issue that happened with the two crashes, but to replicate additional kinds of problems so that pilots aren't so startled if this were to happen again.
Okay, so not treating it just like any other plane, kind of giving it its own sort of thing.
For this particular model, because of the past problems, They want to have specific kinds of training for this model so that the past 2 crashes don't happen again.
And you've been following along. Do you think the public is going to be ready to accept the plane back in the air? Because I think that's one of the things that the airlines are going to have to be cognizant of. There's going to be some people that are going to be uneasy about this thing.
There will be people who will be uneasy no matter what the outcome is from Boeing, from FAA, from Transport Canada, etc. But given the past history of airliners, where there have been some problems in the past, where aircraft models have been grounded sometimes for months at a time, just like the 737 MAX, because of safety concerns, the system that's in place around the world has become one that's trusted by the public. That is, it's not just one organization that has to agree. The entire industry has to come to a consensus that the things that are being done either by an individual aircraft company like Boeing or an individual regulator by the FAA is not only sufficient, but acceptable to all the organizations around the world who certify airplanes.
It'll be interesting to see when these things get back up in the air and how everybody responds, but maybe in the new year. Todd, thanks a lot for the chat this morning.
Well, thank you again for having me.
Take care. There is Todd Curtis from airsafe.com, as we are still waiting to see everybody give these planes, the Boeing 737 MAXs, the approval to be back up in the air, and then to see how you respond to it. I'm a little bit more skeptical than Todd is of how people will respond to it. There's other times when planes have been down, I don't think there's as much coverage and as much attention paid to the fact that they were down. These things were kind of a big deal.
For more on aviation safety and security, please visit airsafe.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.